Hey, welcome. I'm Christine, and I love to support mature yoga teachers and sharing their wisdom with the world. Today, I'm talking about child's pose as a functional asana. So, what is functional asana? So, this is a series I've been working with, by the way. So, functional is typically juxtaposed or compared with aesthetic, right? So, like a beautiful pose, right? So there's many beautiful poses in yoga, and a lot of times people focus on the beauty of their poses. And so, some different people, like in the physical therapy world and in the fitness world, have been saying, like, well, let's talk about functionality. Because for many people, they come to yoga for functionality, not for the aesthetics. So that's what we're talking about today. And I'm going to be talking about child's pose. So, child's pose is an interesting one. It's often referred to as like a resting pose, or this is something you can do when you don't feel like doing, vinyasa or flow or whatever, right? So, um, that it's often presented as a pose that's easy, and my experience over the years is actually that many people find child's pose to be really difficult. And there's a few reasons. So, one of them is this your ankle. Um, I've worked with many people over the years whose ankles are really stiff. And so, when they go to child's pose, their ankle will look like, it'll look something like that when they go down. And it feels bad, it hurts. Um, why is child's pose functional in terms of your ankles? Well, because it can support that, it can support the mobility of the ankle here, right? So, and for many people, that's a good thing. Like if you're walking down the street, I'm trying to stay in the shot here. If you're walking down the street and you step on something and your ankle needs to move into kind of like a strong uh, I always have to think about it, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. So has to move into a strong plantar flexion. Um, but it doesn't move that way, then you could end up hurting yourself. You can end up hurting the ankle. So having flexibility in the ankles is important. I'm not talking about hyper flexibility in the ankles, but some flexibility in the ankles is important. So, what could you do for somebody who's got that issue in child's pose? One simple fix would be, or possible fix, I shouldn't say simple, possible fix would be to roll a blanket, maybe a little bit, right? So, that could be one fix for child's pose. So, they have a little bit of support under the ankle here when they're doing it, and that might feel better. Some people need even more support. The ankles are really stiff and don't flex easily. So that child's pose might be better for some folks, right? That's an option. So when you see those ankles that are, when you see somebody try to do child's pose and their ankles are like this, and you'll see, I've seen it many times teaching, many times. That's when the blanket may be indicated. Uh, Before that, I want to say that it's really important to normalize props in your classes, right? Because if people think that props are for wimps or props are for losers and they don't want to use props or nobody else is using props, that's a problem, right? Because props are useful for just about everybody for different reasons. So you got to normalize the uses of props, and then I think that's important from the gate. Okay, another issue in child's pose are the girls. So I remember one time I was teaching, and a woman came up to me after class, and she was like, "You flat-chested yoga teachers don't understand anything about what it's like for us women with bigger boobs." And at the time, I was like, "What?" I just remember being like, "What do you mean?" But this is a long, long time ago. But she started to tell me about how much weight there was in her chest. And then you ask somebody to do child's pose. What happens in child's pose if you have large breasts and then you're doing child's pose? Like, it can be super uncomfortable for people. So one of the ways we can accommodate the larger breaths are with props like bolsters. So separating and by the way, this also can work for the big belly, right? Separating the knees a little bit, having a bolster here. For some people, this works. For some people, another um, possibility is having the bolster elevated a little bit. So use another block there to elevate. That can work. Um, for some people, having two blocks is even better, like this. And then they have space for their arms underneath. The hips are a little bit higher. So I'm not completely um, getting rid of the problem of it's not a problem, by the way. I'm not getting rid of the obstacle of the big breasts with this, but at least I'm giving some options and trying some other ways that may be more comfortable for some people, or even up here so the breasts have space between the floor. That's one that's one possibility, one way of working, and often that works for bigger bellies too. Just to get trying to find more space can be really helpful. Now, of course, all of this is everything I've just shown is assuming that people can do what I'm doing right now, like have some capacity for a strong. This is strong flexion. This is loaded flexion in my knees, right? So my knees have to be able to take it to be able to even consider any of those options I used. I was working with somebody last week, or we were talking actually about Japan, and when I lived in Japan a long time ago, and when I went to tea ceremony a couple of times. And when you go to tea ceremony, you sit like this. And people in Japan can sit like this. That's part of their culture. They're used to sitting on their heels. So I remember when I was there, I was like, I'm going to sit on my heels. And I went to tea ceremony, and tea ceremony was like 2 hours long. And after about 30 minutes of this, I was like, I'm dying. And so, I was like, could I sit a little bit like this? And the friends that was with were like, um, okay, but you're a foreigner, you can get away with it. I really didn't want to sit like this for much longer at all. That so eventually I had to end up. I was sitting with my legs crossed at the end, and they thought that was hilarious. But anyway, the point being that this amount of flexion in the knees is difficult for a lot of people, even for brief periods of time, right? And all of that. So we have to keep that in mind. I worked with somebody with double knee replacements. Child's pose was just off the table, like not happening. Another thing that can help some people in child's pose with that kind of a knee issue is to go back to this blanket, this round blanket, and stand up on the knees, and then put the blanket between the calves and the thighs. That can be better than, again, you can use a bolster. So for some people that works really well. That's one possibility. Um, and then other people have the problem of this knee issue. Like I can't be on my knees, right? That's another issue. So for those folks, having a folded blanket under the knees, it may work. It may not. That's another option. And what I should say here is that none of these are hard, fast solutions for everybody. These are things to explore. And I think when you approach your yoga practice as like, here's some exploration we can do, it's much better than saying this will fix you or this will make you able to do it. And the minute you start saying things like child's pose is a resting pose, you're automatically excluding people who have had knee replacements or knee injuries or can't sit on their knees, have limited flexibility, all of that stuff. The minute you say it's a beginner's pose, like, that drives me crazy that we use these kind of language that it's a beginner's pose. There could be people who've been practicing yoga for 50 years, but they have knee issues. And so to say it's a beginner's pose, it's nuts. It's a pose that may be adaptable, that may be applicable to some people some of the time, may be adaptable for some people some of the time. So I'm going to show you something with a chair here. And this is for the folks who just are like, knees are off limits, right? I don't want to I don't want to bend my knees that much. It hurts to be on my knees. And so this is a Asana, or the sunbird pose with a chair. And so similar benefits to child's pose. So inhaling, rocking forward, and exhaling, you can bend the knees a little bit, lower the chin towards the chest, and rock back. And so you get a similar benefit in terms of mobilization of the low back, right? So the question is child's pose a functional pose? And the answer is it is functional if we adapt it to meet the functional needs of the person that we're working with. So those are just a few ideas. So many more ideas with every post, but those are just a few. I hope they're helpful. Let me know if you know how you like this video and ideas for other videos. I'll keep working on the functional stuff, but I hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next week.